Good evening, sir, and good evening, everyone. The topic that I will be discussing for tonight is about ethylene oxide, prepared by Miss Feli Palencia and our instructor, Mr. Boris Biasaga, and the due date for today is May 17, 2024. So about the agenda, we have general information, investigate how the substance is used or created, what are the risk health effects, include any other risks to the environment, equipment, property, or buildings, include any vulnerable workers that might be vulnerable, why or why not, and how. Rate the consequences of exposure, either extreme, major, medium, minor, and include the rating for your exposure, conclusion, and references. The general information of ethylene oxide is a colorless gas with a characteristically sweet ether-like odor. It is highly flammable and dissolved easily in the water, alcohol, and most organic solvent, produced since the early 1900s. Ethylene oxide has been used as chemical intermediate and as a sterilizing agent. Ethylene oxide may be also referred to as oxytrine. Uses of ethylene oxide. Ethylene oxide is used as chemical intermediate primarily to produce ethylene glycol or antifreeze. Smaller amounts of ethylene oxide are used as sterilizing agent, disinfectants, fumigants, or insecticides. Medical facilities, hospital, medical and dental clinics, and manufacturers of sterilized medical supplies account for the majority of its use as sterilant. In Canada, approximately 120 healthcare facilities use ethylene oxide as sterilant. Ethylene oxide is used as fumigant to control bacteria in species and natural seasoning and to control insects in store product. What are the first aid measures for ethylene oxide? Inhalation. Take precaution to prevent a fire. Example, remove source of ignition. Take precaution to ensure your own safety before attempting rescue. Example, water appropriate protective equipment. Move the victims to fresh air. Keep at rest in the position comfortably for breathing. If skin contact, flush with gently flowing water. If the clothing is contaminated, immediately remove the clothing and flush the skin with water and get medical attention. For eye contact, immediately flush the contaminated eyes with large amount of gently flowing water, occasionally lifting the upper and lower eyelids. If irritation or pain persists, see the doctor and get medical attention immediately. For ingestion, not applicable. For gas. First aid. If exposure are concerned, see a medical professional for advice. All first aid procedures should be periodically reviewed by medical professional familiar with chemicals and its condition to use in a workplace. Breathing has stopped. Trained personnel should begin artificial respiration. Environmental exposure overview. There is a limited data in Canada on the general population exposure to ethylene oxide, but the most important route of exposure is inhalation. In one national study of 50 ambient air samples taken over 24 hours in randomly selected residential areas, 94% of the sample were below the detection limit. The same study looking at the indoor air reported 98% of sample below the limited detection. Sources of environmental exposure to ethylene oxide are mainly products that had been sterilized with the compound, including medical products, food, clothing, cosmetics, and beekeeping equipment. A minor source of exposure to ethylene oxide is gasoline combustion and cigarettes, either residue from fumigation of tobacco or as combustion by the product. Occupational exposure overview. Inhalation is the most important route of occupational exposure to ethylene oxide. CAREX Canada estimated that approximately 2,400 Canadians are exposed to ethylene oxide at work. Although the majority of the ethylene oxide is used to produce chemicals, most occupational exposure occur through the use of sterilization, particularly of medical equipment. The highest exposure have been measured in facilities using ethylene oxide as a sterilant or fumigants, including hospitals, healthcare facilities, and spice manufacturers. Workers may be exposed while changing ethylene oxide gas cylinder, from leaking equipment, from improper ventilation at the sterilizer door, discharge line, aerators, and in the general room, during removal and transfer of items from the sterilization to an aerator, and from incomplete aeration of items. Workers that might be vulnerable. In studies of female sterilization workers and one study involving paternal exposure to ethylene oxide, increased risk of adverse pregnancy outcome, most often spontaneous abortion, had been reported. When the pregnancies of sterilizing staff were analyzed according to the employment at the time of conception, the rate of spontaneous abortion was significantly less than 0.001, increased in the exposure of 15.1% versus the unexposed 4.6% group. The most recent pregnancy outcome was chosen for analysis to maximize recall of pregnancy and exposure information, with 1,320 women who provided information on the age and ethylene oxide exposure contributing to the analysis. The total of 32 women reported ethylene oxide exposure during pregnancy. No quantitative measure or details on timing of exposure during pregnancy were available. So as you can see in this chart, there is a concentration of ethylene oxide, the first line, potency, margin between potency and concentration, exposure potency index, and priority for further action, Health Canada in 1994. It's about 0.0062 UG per meter concentration in the ambient air in the southern Ontario, predicted from CAD fugacity model. So it's about 2,200 by 1,500. That's the potency. And the margin between the potency is 350,000 to 240,000. That's the concentration, and the exposure is 2.9 by 10 and 4.2 by 10. So it is moderate to moderate. The second row is 3.34 UG by meter censored mean concentration in ambient air from multimedia survey in Canada, Health Canada 1999. It's about 2,200 to 1,500 and 6,500 to 4,400. And the exposure for potency is 1.5 by 10 and 2.3 by 10, moderate to high. And and 0.17 UG per meter. Censored means concentration in indoor ambient from Multimedia Survey in Canada, Helped Canada 1999. 2,200 to by 1,500, and it's 13,000 to 8,800, and 7.7 by 10 and 1.1 time by 10. So this is moderate to moderate. Conclusion: ethylene oxide is a human carcinogen and is mutagenic for animals. It was determined that an assessment is necessary to characterize the extent of exposure and associated risks to human health and the Canadian environment. Thank you, everyone. So that's the ending of my discussion for today about ethylene oxide. I hope you like it and you get information, and thank you so much for tonight.